the July 13th agenda. And if you looked at it on the line, well, we'll cover postponements in it.
I'll make a motion for approval.
Okay. Singer. Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Joe, have any items for postponement or withdrawal?
Yes, we have two items, item C and item D. So Price Property and Cherry Blossom both requested postponement to the August meeting.
D, you said?
C and D.
C and D.
Price and Cherry Blossom Village. Okay, so if you were here for either one of those properties, we're not going to hear them this month. And briefly, we'll tie it next month instead of this month. At this time, Mr. Perkins, will you swear everyone in?
Everyone signed in to speak. If you please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the statement you make tonight to be the truth to the best of your information and belief? Thank you.
All right. Before we get started, I would like to read a resolution to the record here. It says, whereas the resignation of Matt Summers, principal planner for the Georgetown-Scott County Planning Commission, it is essential we express our appreciation for his service to the community and the commission. Upon joining the planning and zoning staff in May of 2014, Matt quickly became an integral member upon whom all relying on planning and zoning could depend. Matt's work ethic, the ease with which he interacts with powerful and ordinary alike, and his determination to do his job, community needs served our community and commission as well. Matt's contribution to planning and zoning and our citizens will be difficult to replace. Amen. The commission is grateful for the standard of excellence Matt maintained throughout his time with us and pledges its best effort to maintain that standard, which he helped set. On behalf of our community, we thank Matt for his service, wishing him and his family well as they embark on new challenges. The foregoing resolution was approved by unanimous vote.
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution, but to reject the resignation.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. And this was done at the commission's regular meeting, July 13th, 2023. And just for the record, Matt is leaving us and going back to his home state of Oklahoma. And he will be greatly missed.
Thank you.
I don't know if you all want to do it.
We need to just pass it down that everyone needs to have their light on.
Yeah, pass it on.
And after last day will be when?
Next week, Friday.
Next Friday. Week from tomorrow.
Mr. Chairman, though, that does not imply that we aren't still furious with him. So, that won't change.
And Kane, have you set in process wheels to try to find a weekly replacement?
Yes, yes, the wheels are turning.
Good enough. All right, with that, we will begin the agenda of the new business, FST 2023-23, the Plunkett property, final subdivision plat to subdivide 3 3 5-acre parcels from a larger farm located at 4866 Muddy Ford Road.
Just a point of order. I was able to get half of the side, but if you can make sure your lights are on, Jay's having issues with the audio. And for Jamie's sanity.
In the consent agenda?
Yeah, I was gonna ask.
Okay.
Elise, we were told Monday that this may be consent eligible.
It is, yes.
Is there anyone here that is opposed to this property or has questions about it?
I would like for us to hear it.
Okay. All right.
I can do that. So do you want to swear people in?
I did.
Oh, you did? Oh, I was outside. Okay, that's on me. This application is FSP 2023-23, a final subdivision plat to subdivide 3 5-acre parcels from a larger farm located at 4866 Muddy Ford Road. It's an A1 zone parcel with current total acreage of 138 and some acres, and then each parcel would be 5 acres with entrances off of Muddy Ford Road. There's no variances or waivers requested as part of this, and staff recommends approval. So this is the larger farm. The S-curve of Muddy Ford Road is in part joined by this property, but the area subject to the subdivisions is north of that curve. And I put it out there. This is the proposal here, so there will be 3 lots formed with frontages onto Muddy Ford Road. The northernmost lots 1 and 2 will have an entrance off of Muddy Ford and that they will be sharing. That's on the center line of their shared boundary. And then the remainder northern portion of the farm and the proposed tract 3 will have an entrance kind of south of that. They've been stated as existing farm entrances, and if new ones needed to be proposed, that would be subject to state approval. There have been some kind of comments at the workshop on the rough distance from the entrance easement to kind of the midpoint or start of the curve that is on Muddy Ford Road. So from the about center of the access easement, the southernmost item is about 500 feet to the start of the curve where it kind of rises and then does the dip and bend through. And then to about the center point of that curve where it is at that lowest point is about 810 feet. That's used off of the scale that was provided in the measurements made available as part of the survey. So it has pretty decent visibility. Our typical expectation is 300 feet in both directions, and that does meet that. And given that it's a standing entrance and I haven't heard anything from the state about it, we don't expect anything that would suggest that these would be moving anytime shortly. However, if the state were to determine otherwise, that's up for their discretion, given that it's a number highway. Overall, staff does recommend approval of the subdivision plat subject to the 4 conditions we typically see for subdivision plats. I can run through them, but there's nothing atypical with them that should be noted.
Just for clarification, in the future, does the staff prepare this or does the owner prepare this?
The packet or the image?
The image?
That's a staff one.
Okay. I mean, because
It is a little
it makes
bit
it
low.
look like Muddy Ford Road's a nice straight shot down through
It
there.
does, it is a little bit deceptive for clarity and imagery and everything like that. It is a little bit difficult to try to find a balance between depicting the area and then also having too much on it that makes it impossible to understand what's going on. So I'll note it for the future to work on getting those.
Even if we have to hand draw it in there or something, it's,
Yeah.
it makes it look like it's, there shouldn't be any problems with sight lines and all because it's just a straight road and we all know that it's not.
Yeah, yes, I can make a note for the future.
So the sign that's out there now, is that on the southern gate?
I believe so.
There's 3 gates out there, and so it's on the middle gate, but I'm assuming the southernmost gate is on the existing property down here past the curve.
I think it is at the middle one, to my
Okay.
interpretation of where it's placed. I can stand to be corrected if the applicant's here and can,
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure it is there. Any other questions for Elise?
I think there was someone back here. When she said-
This property is not really great about parking. If the
If,
alternative.
if you would come up to state your name.
My name is Virginia Teague. The property has not been particularly outstanding for parking. If it doesn't fly and the alternatives are like a lagoon, is 5 acres sufficient to be able to adequately solve that sewer issue?
I will turn that over to our staff here to answer that question.
the type of waste management system that would be on the property is up to the discretion of the health department. And if they find that while it did fail a perk test and a lagoon is sufficient and it can be placed on the property, we would obviously leave that to them in their discretion. So
Okay.
I don't know entirely, but to my understanding, there are parcels that are 5 acres or between 5 and 10 that do have lagoons on them.
All right. Does that answer your question, Virginia?
Sort of.
Okay. You probably get more information out of the health department than here.
There has to be some sort of historical precedent, that's all I was asking.
Okay. Any more comments? The owners or owner's representative have anything to say?
I'm here, Charlie. I'm representing Mr. Plunkett. If anybody has any questions, be glad to try to answer.
Okay.
Well, I have a comment, but it's not entirely related to that property.
Okay.
In general about what's going on that road.
All right.
And what I'm proposing is for this to be continued. Because there's some information about the flooding that's happening on that road and other issues around that property that may affect people coming in and out.
Uh-huh.
So I think we need to get more information. I'd like to see us have that information before we vote on this.
Is it related to this development plan that would exacerbate the issue, or in terms of asking for the
could.
continuance?
It could.
Are you aware of any of it, Elise?
In some form, I mean, yeah, when these areas that are a little bit more hilly or kind of in the foothills of the north-south dividing line, they tend to have an increased flooding, but I don't know of anything to the extent that you're
So flooding on
describing
the
or-
road?
There may be issues that I'm just not seeing
Could
regularly.
contribute to below that. There's just some information that needs to be gathered about that we don't have, and it is, and I do believe it is pertinent. And it's being good neighbors to the people who are affected by that.
Was it a neighbor that raised a concern that's going to bring the information to
No,
next month's
I'm
meeting?
concerned about it because I used to live.
Who's bringing the information? I guess I'm just trying to figure out more about, if we need to delay it or continue it
Well-
based off of who's bringing the information and.
It's the people that live down there that have to face this severe flooding on a regular basis. I mean, it's not just,
Is that who's bringing the information, the neighbors, or? I'm just asking questions. I'm not,
I guess it's both. Public safety issue from, the fire department, the police departments go down there on a regular basis during flooding times.
okay.
Yeah, I don't have any information right in that vicinity. You can welcome to come to our office. We put together recently a map of, there's over 100 probably locations throughout Scott County that flood the roadways and things like that. We have, the last 6 months, we've been putting together information from emergency management, the road department, where roadways cross floodplains, things like that. And yeah, there are definitely locations, the northern part of the county has the majority of them anyway. So I would probably be researching this information. I'm not sure what you would want me to look into beyond that.
I would just like to see from the, not just this property, but above this property, below this property, and down, more about the flooding. And what's contributing to that. Seemingly, it's getting worse. I'm saying continue it. I'm not saying
Deny it.
deny it. I'm just
Yeah.
saying, I want more information.
Gotcha.
We may need some more guidance on what type of information.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Susan?
what I was asking, trying to get to exactly what we need and
I would
who's
say that
gathering
farm
it.
hasn't changed in my life, other than there used to be a house there where Mr. Gilkey's son lived. But there's been no development on that farm at all in my life. And if the flooding's getting worse, that has more to do with the extreme weather we're having than it is anything that's going on or would make a difference there, I would think. And the creek and everything where it crosses over is down past that property. Yeah, so there's no road issue flooding there, that I'm aware of.
It'd be on the other side of the road,
Yeah.
right at that location.
Yep.
Does the applicant, have any concerns still continuing it?
No, this is the first we've heard anything
Okay.
about flooding.
Yeah.
It's not in a floodplain, as I
Right.
can see according to the record. And Brad joins it, that beautiful lake is on Brad's farm right up above. So he probably knows more about it, but I remember the Gilkeys had a house there years ago on one of these tracks.
So is your
And-
property adjoin this one?
That's on the other side.
Okay.
Yeah. And the small creek he's talking about is across the street. And most of the contributing to that would be north, wouldn't it, Brad? Coming out of that valley back there in the back?
Yeah.
So other than runoff that you would normally get, I don't know that any development here is going to, whatever goes under the roof and is under the blacktop, of course, contributes somewhat. Every time we put a roof down, it contributes.
That would be my thing, is if we stop and continue this on, and I'm not saying one way or another we should or shouldn't, but if we do, then the precedent we set, well, do we stop everything until we find out where all the water's going? I'm sure there's circumstances we wouldn't want to really look into this, but I don't know that this particular piece.
It's not like there's a whole bunch of blacktop, a whole bunch of houses right next to it. And that creek will rise and probably flood on down the creek a bit. Not right there, but on down the creek a bit, I think. Now, the neighbor may know better because she lives there.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah, but
That creek's
my-
running north.
my experience with that creek has been it'll come up and flood, 2 or 3 hours, it's back down, everybody goes back.
Because that's the
But-
dividing ridge, is right there on the
Yeah.
side of that.
But there's tons of roads in this county that have, I live on Old Oxford and they just repaved it. Every time we have a big rain, you go through water up to your knees almost. It's just, again, I think our severe weather is affecting a lot of things.
That's probably true, but at the same time,
I understand.
I think we like to see more detailed information. I would. So,
Rita,
My problem is, I don't know where we're gonna get that.
we need to try to get it and look for it. That's why I'm saying continue it.
Rita, I'm assuming they want to sell that property to
5-acre tract.
build on it.
Build a house.
It goes from the road uphill pretty steep, doesn't it? Does it
does,
flatten
but-
off back up through there?
Like a walkout basement, and it does flatten out on back in there. There may actually be some ground that it will perk, where that's our next step, is to go to the health department
Okay,
to get that established.
all right. Thank you.
I'm not opposed to continuing it. I just want to be clear about what information we want and where it's coming from.
I have no idea.
So I'm not trying to be difficult. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to make
Well, I
clear,
know
because
that-
if we
I know the
continue it,
state-
obviously there's an impact to the applicant, and we don't want to set a precedent of continuing it just because.
Well, I know the state maintains more detailed information that, I've not seen about this particular area, and I'd like to see it. So,
Regarding,
the flooding in that area and so forth and so on.
And you said, Ben, you have some detailed information?
I know you go down around Turkey Foot, you don't go home when that happens. So where does it flood? Does it flood past your house?
Oh, yeah. Right in front of it, it goes,
That's where the creek crosses
Right
over,
up to that number, that first 5
almost
acres.
to it, yeah.
Yeah, they have to float boats.
So there's not any actual actual flooding in front of these lots, just past it?
No, it floods up to halfway up that number one, 5 acres. And then all the way past our place, Arlene's place, down the road to Diane's. And then it peters out just a little bit because we have Eagle Creek that follows that whole section.
Ma'am, if you would, for the record, could you state your name and your address?
I'm deaf, so speak again.
Thank you.
I don't know what you said.
We need your name.
Janice, Janece, Rollett, Rollbt, 5000 Muddy Ford.
Thank you.
So Elise or Ben or anyone, is there any indication that, based off the topography and this final subdivision plat, that this would lead to increased flooding? I mean, it's not in a floodplain, right?
Right, we've looked at that.
Yeah.
There is floodplain down there. It is on the other side of the road.
Right.
So
And north of there.
there is a drain that comes down up the hills between
Right.
the tracks. We could, I mean, somebody could be hired to do a entire watershed study of that area to update. It would probably be a $10,000 to $20,000 study. We could determine, I guess, in depth, like depths of water and how often it overtops the road and things like that. So,
To your point, probably that would set a precedent based off of a lot of other roads flooding in the county. What's the threshold for doing a study like that, right, of an area?
you don't normally study these upper areas.
Right.
FEMA does not study an area unless it's greater than 1 square mile drainage to
Right.
that. And that's where the floodplain actually starts, so.
Ben, while we're at it, I just wondered, has there ever been a 5-acre tract that would not pass health qualifications to not have a septic tank or build a lake either, or the pond, put it in, whatever? Has that ever?
Not to my knowledge, but I can't speak to their, I don't know if they've ever denied anybody.
I don't think so.
James, what they tell me is there's always a system.
That's
There's
what I'm
some
saying.
kind of a system to handle.
Yeah, that's what I've always understood.
Yeah.
If one fails,
Right.
find another.
I can only recall, in my experience in that part of the county, only putting in one lagoon. Granted, I know it's not the best, but, you know, if nothing else, you've got all that rock underneath that's gonna hold it, you know, as it evaporates and settles out. But again, the only nearby lagoon I can recall it putting in was Indian Creek, you know, and it's kind of elevated as well. And I don't even know if that was 5 acres.
I think those lagoons work very well in my experience, what I've seen out there. And to the point of the flooding issue, any development we do is gonna do this. Every Dollar General, everybody that's coming before you is gonna affect flooding.
Yeah, but this area already floods.
Right, right.
I can show you a picture of the last flood going right up to there.
Please do. You have it, stick. I believe in you.
That goes right up next to Mr. Ponce's property on the 5 acres.
Is this
on
his
number
property?
one.
Is that black fence across the road
That's next to
his?
his property, yes.
Okay, yeah.
I think he's on the same side of the road as they are, isn't he?
What is it that backs the water up? So is the crossing down there that backs the water up so bad? Is it what backs the water up so, I mean, I know we get a lot down through there, but something backs that water up down through there pretty bad.
It actually, it crosses over from the other side of the road.
That's the choke.
That's where it comes down, from, and then it crosses over that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a natural growth down there.
So I'm playing,
Cross
So I'm playing devil's advocate. I'll ask the staff. Let's say we continue it, we wait till next month, and it comes back and says, yeah, there is an increase in flooding on Muddy Ford. Even if the data shows that, if there's nothing about this development that goes outside of our ordinances, then it's not within our realm to deny it just because flooding has increased on Muddy Ford. Correct? I mean, in that case, we would be denying development all over the county.
I think the only way that it would fall into our purvey is the only way I see that ever going into something that we would get into is if, say, it was a commercial development with large-scale parking and a lot of impervious
Surfaces, yeah.
But at the same time, that's going to fall,
Yeah.
With Mr. Krebs
Yeah.
as far as,
Recommendations on,
drainage
yeah.
and retention and whatnot.
Yeah.
Depending on what the future building plans look like, building inspection or Mr. Krebs, say if this person didn't want a front yard at all and decided they wanted to hardscape the whole thing and pave all the way to the property line, maybe Mr. Krebs or building inspection would take issue with that. But, part of building inspection and whatnot, and, they're gonna go out there, and this is the opposite side of it. Trust me, I get the concerns, but as far as, what they're gonna look at, they're gonna look at where the home site is, what's the distance, that's one of the reasons setbacks exist. That's one of the reasons why entrances are mandated, to state level and local to be inspected where they're at. They're gonna be very particular about the final grade of any property that goes in. Generally to shed the drainage away from not only your property for safety's sake and integrity, but also your neighbors. During construction, there should be silt fence and whatnot installed. Again, that falls under building inspection through routine inspections and, being a state thoroughfare, the state could also get involved if there was an issue. But I don't see any precedent or grounds for us to deny.
Right.
Unless we got into a situation of a majority of the property being impervious surface.
Right.
And maybe data that Mr. Krebs has or a state entity being like, this looks like an issue.
Which I don't think you're going to blacktop the 5 acres, right?
I can't imagine affording to do that.
Either, but.
The only thing I'd say to all that was, for the erosion control, when it's a 5-acre tract like that and just building a house, there are no regulations that are requiring all that. Now, you don't dump mud onto your neighbors, things like that. Your neighbor you'd have some liability there, but as far as state regulations, do not get into 5-acre ag lots with a single residence. It'd be impossible to track all that.
But there is state regulations in any waterway in the state of Kentucky, including the waterways around Muddy Ford. If you go around and start digging around in it and changing things, that you're supposed to get a permit for that. Is that correct?
Yes, if you're working in a stream, there are state and federal jurisdiction. So, and I'm not aware that they're working in a stream.
That stream is not on this property, it's across the
Last couple of months in the paper, I've seen permit requests for Muddy Ford Road, putting in culverts on those driveways that they cross that stream.
Will these drives require a culvert?
I don't think so.
No.
Since not even just for general drainage along the roadside, there's no existing, I guess, drainage ditch, so to speak.
There is no
They
on
already
that
exist
side.
and they're pretty flat to the road.
Mr. Jesse, if you want to make a motion.
Well, I make a motion that we do continue it, and we're served, and I want to make sure when I vote for something, I understand it completely. And we're serving the people of Scott County, and that's just my personal thing. I want more information.
Should we include in the resolution, or the motion, what resolution specifically we're asking for?
I just want more information. I mean, I've already talked about it, about the flooding of that whole area through there. This property and the property below it, so.
So, Flooding is defined in many, many ways too. I mean, it can be outside where people don't want, it's subject to anybody's interpretation. If it's water that stays in the floodplain, that is really not flooding.
Then I'd like to see that. I don't think we're asking for too much, nor do I think the people here that live there are asking for too much. I just think it's very reasonable that I'm saying to continue until we get more information.
Are you requesting this from staff or the consultant to do a study on this?
I would want information from the staff, from the consultant, and I know there's probably some information already out there from the state, because this is a state road. So,
Okay.
and these problems are, they mentioned about, in general, the weather is getting worse. Well, if the flooding is getting worse, I think that would even lead to us needing more information.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Jesse to continue this application to next month. And I do not have a second. Is there any other action that we need to take on this?
I'll make a motion for approval of FSP 2023-23.
I have a motion by Ms. Singer to approve FSP 2023-23.
Second.
Second by Mr. Garrett. Ms. Singer?
Yes.
Mr. Shirley?
Yes.
Mr. Jesse?
No.
Mr. Vest?
Yes.
Mr. Stone?
Yes.
Mr. Garrett?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Yes. And the chair will vote yes. All right.
Now, that being said, I think if we still want staff, we could have some separate discussion. Staff could bring in to next meeting specific data on this road, if that would
At the end
at least
of the-
answer questions that you have.
At the end of this meeting, I am going to bring up an issue about a lot of things concerning development that we need to look at.
Okay. Next item is FSP 2023-24, James and Shirley Downs property, final subdivision plat to subdivide one 10-acre farm into two 5-acre parcels located at 2101 Wood Lake Road.
On the staff reports, it is an error in the numbering, so
Okay.
it should be 24, yes.
Yes, ma'am.
This item is on consent agenda.
This is consent eligible. Does anyone wish to hear information about this? Or have any opposition about it? Yes, sir.
We would.
Okay.
Very good. Alrighty, this is a final subdivision plat to subdivide one 10-acre farm into two 5-acre parcels located at 2101 Wood Lake Road. It's an agriculturally zoned property, and they're looking to essentially split it kind of down the middle. So staff does recommend approval of it, and there are no variances or waivers applicable in this application. This is an aerial shot of the property, so it's just north of the intersection of Wood Lake Road and Pea Ridge Road. And then this is the proposed subdivision. So the applicant has proposed a shared access easement for all three parcels using an existing entrance onto Wood Lake Road. You can see in red is the kind of main route that goes to the existing residence on it. As of the time of the survey, it was not, there's no residences on the parcel that's now being split up. And then they've identified as one C2 and one C1. They'll be kind of using it to a point on the on the access easement for entrance onto their tracks. Ultimately, staff doesn't have any issues with it. If they, for some reason, needed a new entrance, they would have to work with the state in order to ensure and get a permit granted. Ultimately, staff recommends approval of this application, subject to the 4 conditions we see for agricultural subdivisions.
So it says they're subdividing one 10-acre lot into 2 5-acre lots, but yet they also own this property behind it that the roads are going through. So is that not considered?
That's not being subdivided. At one point, this was a 20-acre parcel that was, through a minor subdivision, subdivided into 2 10-acre parcels. And then
Then they're dividing that 10-acre
they're
parcel.
dividing the one 10-acre parcel into 2 5s for residents for a child and then a grandchild.
Gotcha. Thank you. Any questions for Elise?
So,
Yes, sir. If you would come up and state your name and your address, please.
Yeah, my name is Jared Marshall. I'm outside of Cincinnati in Liberty Township in Ohio. My grandmother, through marriage, Emma Hampton, owns roughly about 3 acres on this property. I'm not sure exactly where. I'm just coming into this, so she got the letter in the mail, so that's why we're here. So I'm trying to really understand, in layman's terms, what's happening here.
And how it impacts our property.
Right.
Where's her property?
I can answer that for you.
All right.
I'm David Vest. I live right beside Miss.
Oh, do you?
property.
Okay.
Okay. That's
Okay,
helpful.
where this is being divided is directly behind her.
Okay.
But if you pass where she owns, around my house, the next driveway to the right, it's part of the old stone farm.
Okay.
So it's everything behind her. And if you look at the map, you can see it's got her, it's got mine here, and hers is here. See, there's me, there's Miss Hampton, everything is behind it.
Okay, so nothing's changing like for her, right?
Nothing's
Okay, that's
changing
why I
on
was
her
like-
end, no.
That's why we just came down, like, I don't know
Right.
what's going on, but we should get down here, okay.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
You good with that, Mr.
Where would
Marshall?
be value added tonight?
Jared, you want to show that to her there?
You're a good grandson, Jared.
Yeah, you had to get down.
Yeah.
She's right next to me, and that little, if you come around that curve, that wooded area, before you get to me is all hers. Yeah, her line fence is where this is.
Oh.
There's 5.
Sounds like Jared might be the person who needed
You
that.
good, you good with that, Ms. Hampton?
I appreciate you.
All right.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Not a problem. All right. Is there any other questions or comments?
Sir, I didn't, so she is, I did not hear what she said, so she's okay with,
Yeah, she's good. She forgot her hearing aid too, so.
It's all right.
You just wanna make sure you're good.
Okay, I need I'll take a motion.
So moved. Approval of this application.
Mr. Shirley. And Mr. Smith. Mr. Shirley?
Yes.
Mr. Jesse?
yes.
Mr. Vest?
Yes.
Mr. Stone?
Yes.
Mr. Garrett?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Singer?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. If you would, we've got the owners here. Okay, come up and see Mr. Perkins there, and to get you signed in.
Sign and date, copy yours.
I was getting ready to ask them. That's who.
Huh?
I was getting ready to ask
Ask
them.
them. That was sweet of him to come from Cincinnati, with his grandmother.
All right, the next item is ZMA 2023-27, Sadieville Dollar General Store. It's a zoning map amendment to change the zoning district from A1 to B2, located at 170 Porter Road. And this is a public hearing, so I need to open this as a public hearing.
Thank you. Yeah, as you mentioned, this is a zoning map amendment. The applicant's requesting that property at 170 Porter Road be changed from its current zoning of A1 to B2. There is already, and we'll show it on the map in a little bit, there's already some property there already that is zone B2, and they're just sort of looking for a rezoning for about 1.6, 1.7 additional acres to B2 so that they have a sufficient size for the retail store that they're planning for the future. So on the conceptual plan, it does show a retail store with a single entrance and exit point. The conceptual building is about 12 to 13,000 square feet in size, and they are showing about 36 parking spaces on it. So that sort of helps us to demonstrate that the area that they're looking to rezone can handle, sort of the uses that they're proposing. Access to the site is from Porter Road, which is a state road. It's Kentucky 32. What we have here on the screen is an aerial image of the site. You can see where it has the 170 Porter Road labeled. That's roughly the area. The area that looks like it used to have a development on the image is the area that's currently zoned B2, and they're looking for an area a little bit larger than that. It is located very close to I-75 and the 136 interchange. This is the map showing the current zoning of the site, so you can see there in the south east corner of the interchange, the property is already zoned B2 in that area. You can see the sort of white-green colored area is the area that's I guess, zoned agricultural at this time. And then you can see the northern bounds of city limits for Sadieville there as that line with the little flags pointing in towards what is city limits. So this site is within city limits. City limits kind of extend along the north side of Porter Road. And then for this property in particular, you can kind of see it run down Cincinnati Pike, and then it kind of encompasses the remainder of this farm, or this property. This is the conceptual plan that was submitted, and you all have a copy of this in your packet. But on the west side, we've got the I-75 exit ramp for northbound traffic. To the north of the property, you've got Porter Road, and then you can kind of see where the entrance is located or proposed at this time. And the applicant has already had discussions with the Transportation Cabinet about that entrance location. Yeah, as far as, and I know several of you have heard this many times, but when we talk about zone change applications, we always have to talk about KRS 100.213, which talks about the findings that are necessary for the Planning Commission to make their recommendation for zone changes. So the first thing that it directs us to look at is whether or not the zone change is supported by the comprehensive plan. If it is not supported by the comprehensive plan, we have to look at whether or not the existing zoning on the property is incorrect and that what the applicant is proposing is correct. And if that's not, I guess, found to be true, the third thing we would consider is whether or not there have been changes of a social, physical, or economic nature in the area that weren't anticipated in the comprehensive plan, which is sort of why the zone change is being requested at this time. This is clipped from part of our comprehensive plan. This is the future land use map for this area. You can see 170 Porter Road there, and everything that's sort of in that reddish color is areas that are planned for commercial uses. So that's one part of the comprehensive plan. It is not the entirety. I went through all of the goals and objectives, and just as, I guess, sort of a summary, our comprehensive plan directs us to try to guide development away from prime farmland. There is no prime farmland on this site. It directs us to, have urban style development like a retail store in areas that are already within city limits before we consider expanding city limits, and that, this application meets that as well. We don't think that it would adversely impact the transportation network to have additional retail on this site, and that the development on this site would not impact adversely any natural or historic landscapes. So, we do find that the zoning map amendment before you is supported by the comprehensive plan, so we find that, it meets the findings necessary under KRS 100.213. We don't have to consider then, whether or not the current zoning is inappropriate, and we don't have to consider if there were changes not anticipated by the comprehensive plan because we find that it is supported. So we do recommend approval of the zoning map amendment at this time.
Any questions?
I guess historically, what was it, a service station there at one time?
I believe so. It predates me, so I'm not sure.
Yes.
Just for context.
Yes.
So it has had existing somewhat intensive use in that corridor. Just context.
And there were a lot of discussions we had in the comprehensive plan discussions relative to Sadieville and those exits there and the interchanges.
Yeah.
Potential growth there, and I don't know, Mr. Smith might want to add to that.
Is, just in case, it's called Porter Road, even going back in towards Sadieville, but is there enough room, if it gets built up out there and they decide to expand that road and widen it, is there room to accept another lane on that side of the road?
I mean, I would think that there is. I would maybe defer to the applicant's consultant just because they've had more discussions with the transportation cabinet about this than I have.
And maybe they have to take it on the other side.
There's a steep hollow that runs down the right side, going down the road toward 25.
Yeah.
Basically, they can fill that in. That should be no problem.
Right. What, this additional, what'd you say, 1.2 acres?
1.662.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that on one of the sides or the back? Where's that?
I mean, that's a good point. It's a little bit hard to see on the conceptual plan, but it does sort of wrap around, I guess on the concept plan, north is actually to the bottom of the screen. But yeah, it would expand the zoning on the east side.
Okay.
And then a little bit on the south side as well for the most part. And we do have the legal description from the applicant, so we can provide that to the city for aid in drafting any ordinances they might need.
Okay. Any other questions for Matt? All right.
Thank you.
Would the owners or owner representative care to make a comment or explanation?
Yes, I'm Marty Goins. I'm legal counsel for the applicant, Kentucky Lodging and Development. I'm out of Paris. And with me, I have David Myers, president of Kentucky Lodging, and Kendall Wise, owner of Vantage Engineering. As we indicated, my client has an option to purchase a total of 2.65 acres in Sadieville, of which 0.996 is already Zone B2. So we're wanting to rezone 1.662 acres. As you can see, it's in the comp plan to be rezoned. It's commercial. The economic and zoning classification currently is agriculture for the 1.66. That's not appropriate at this time due to the increasing economic changes to the Sadieville area. So we are requesting a zone change to B2 for the entire tract. I can have Mr. Wise or Mr. Myers answer any additional questions you may have.
And let me remind the commission, we're here tonight to discuss the zoning change, not the building process and all there. So
But
That'll come at a later time, Mayor.
Just for the 1.662 acres.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, any other questions for Mr. Goins? Okay. Do I hear a motion to accept this zone change request?
I'll make a motion that we accept the zone change for BMA 2023-27.
Motion by Mr. Smith of Sadeville, second by Mr. Stone. Mr. Smith, I'll let you start off.
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Garrett?
Yes.
Mr. Stone?
Yes.
Mr. Vest?
Yes.
Mr. Jesse?
Yes.
Mr. Shirley?
Yes.
Ms. Singer?
Yes.
And the vote, chair votes yes. Okay. If you would come down and see Mr. Perkins.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Assuming this development does go on, it could have the abstract benefit of making that stretch a little safer, man. I'm out there quite a bit in those trucks, they park right along the side of the road,
Yeah.
they camp out, it's
Yeah.
so strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know,
36 years.
at least they'll be there to police
Make
here.
his way back.
Parking lot.
That lady must have hijacked Mr. Bivens.
All right, we will now close the public hearing and move on to, has staff talked to Mr. Billings? If they get that resolved? or-
Good look, make you feel good.
She must have kidnapped him.
Good seeing you.
Mr. Goins? You say you were from Paris?
Yes, sir.
You akin to Homer?
That's my dad.
Your dad?
Yes, sir.
I talked with him. He stayed on at Paris. I taught industrial arts over there in the early 70s there. So he was a fine fella there. I remember, I remember watching him at high school All-Star game at Install Field. Who in the world is Goins? Never heard of him. He ran all over the field that day.
What'd you say? What'd you say?
Yeah, yes, he did. Nice meeting you. Thank you.
He did not miss call. No, he did not miss his call.
You know, he's named appropriately because most of what he does is just talk to his clients.
All right, the next item is ZMA 2017-37 and PDP 2018-18 Pleasant Valley condos, a request to amend the conditions of approval to allow construction of the remaining approved units located at parcel 188-2065.000.
Yeah, sort of like we did on Monday's workshop. I'm going to give I guess some background on this. And then I don't really have a recommendation on it, as being as it's a project that already has approved conditions of approval. But the proposal here, I guess before you today, is for clarification and/or amendment of a condition of approval that was placed on this development back in, I guess, starting in 2017. You already referenced the parcel, and we'll show a map of the location here in just a minute. But the property is currently zoned R2 PUD. All of the surrounding properties are zoned R1C PUD. So the R2 is a medium-density residential, and the R1C is a single-family residential district. The site is about 13.8 acres in size, and the access to it comes from Schneider Boulevard in the Pleasant Valley neighborhood. Try turning the clicker on. It is not letting me advance the slide. All right. So this is an aerial image of the area. So we've got the site in the star. That's the area we're talking about where the condos are being built. The area to the north or to the top of the screen is the Pleasant Valley neighborhood. And Schneider Boulevard kind of comes down from the, I guess it comes through the entire neighborhood, but here in the image it kind of comes down through the southern part of the single-family, and then it eventually kind of curves around toward the east, towards what will be a Ball Homes development that will eventually tie into it. To the south, you've got Cherry Blossom. You can see some of the golf course there, and then to the east, or sorry, to the west rather, on the left-hand side of the screen, ultimately you can see Oxford Drive. This area sort of that I identified as the project site was originally part of the Pleasant Valley neighborhood that was approved for 50 single-family lots. Back in 2017, the applicant came with a zone change proposal to rezone this part of it to R2 PUD. They wanted to build some multifamily units and 4 single-family units. So ultimately, the Planning Commission did approve that zone change, or recommended approval rather, and City Council approved the zone change, and the applicant returned in 2018 for a preliminary development plan for the site showing 166 condo units and 4 single-family lots. At the zone change time, there was a condition placed on it that was carried forward on the PDP that restricted them to 82 residential units. And as we discussed at workshop, staff made that recommendation because 82 condo units generates roughly the same amount of traffic as 50 single-family units. So a condition was placed that they be restricted to those 82 units until a second access point was provided. And part of that was because the applicant was showing, the concept plan was showing that the condos would eventually connect to the south to what would be an extension that is still proposed today of Lexus Way, which I guess is not familiar, would roughly run through this corridor here. Okay. A final location or alignment has not really ever been done. My understanding is that the state or the city is still, in the process of seeking funding for the design and construction of that. It would benefit the community quite a bit for that road to be built. It's been identified in our comprehensive plan for, in the last comprehensive plan. It will be in the next comprehensive plan. But this project was shown to connect to that. And that was part of the reasoning behind the condition, was to make sure that the existing neighborhood really only experienced the amount of traffic that was proposed back when it was approved for single-family lots, and that the additional lots wouldn't sort of burden the network, the transportation network in the existing single-family neighborhood. So,
I want to ask you a quick question. So at this time, there is no date for Lexus Way to be?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Yeah, the city has applied multiple times for state and federal grants, but at this time it's not been successful. So the applicant is before us today. They're seeking clarification, I guess is one part of what they're asking, is whether or not the condition that was placed, and the specific wording is in the background part of the staff report, but they're seeking clarification on whether or not that second access point has been met, since another connection has been made from the Pleasant Valley neighborhood to Cynthiana Road, and a connection has been made between Pleasant Valley and the Abbey at Old Oxford. So part of their question is whether or not those connections satisfy that requirement from 2017. And then if that is not the case, if you find that that is not the case, and that the intention was for the neighborhood to connect to Lexus Way, and that was the second access point meant by the commission, then they would ask that that condition be amended or removed from the 2017 approval, or the 2018 approval, to allow them to construct the remainder of the units, which would be, I think, 84 condo units. So as part of that discussion, the applicant has conducted a traffic impact study. I've brought the hard copies here as well. I think the applicant will probably end up discussing that some as well. But basically, the study looks at both if the project site never gets built, if the first phase gets built, which is the part that they're approved for currently, or if the entirety of the 166 condo units gets built out. And it looks at those conditions, those 3 separate conditions at both 2023 traffic levels and the projected 2033 traffic levels. And so the intersections specifically that the applicant looked at, I've sort of identified here in the presentation. So the intersection of Cynthiana Road and Palumbo Drive, the intersection of Cynthiana Road and Bueno Crossing, the intersection of Oxford Drive and Cynthiana Road, Oxford Drive and Schneider Boulevard and Wellesley, and Herndon Boulevard and Old Oxford Road, now that the Abbey at Old Oxford connects to Pleasant Valley neighborhood. So basically, they looked at all the ways that that traffic from the condo units could sort of get out to arterial roads in our community. So what I've done here, and these are the same tables that are in the staff report, but I pulled out the ones where the level of service was shown to fall below a level of service of C. Our comprehensive plan directs us to try to strive for maintaining level of service at C or higher as development occurs. So this first table looks at the intersection of Cynthiana Road and Oxford Drive, but specifically it looks at the vehicles that would be leaving Oxford Drive and trying to get onto Cynthiana Road. And so you can see at the 2023, there's really not that much of a delay. That's anticipated whether or not the development gets built. There is some delay per vehicle in the PM peak. You know, if the project site was fully built out, it does drop from a level of service D, which it has today if they were to not build the project, to an E, but the per second delay would be about 9 seconds per vehicle. When we look at the 2033 level of service, that's where we see, I guess, a lot of alarming numbers, I guess you could say, and I'll let the applicant sort of dive into that some, but you can see that there are, whether or not the site is built, there are some very large expected delays at this intersection in the PM peak in the future. The intersection of Bueno Crossing and Cynthiana Road, similarly, you know, not a lot of delays expected under today's traffic conditions, but when we get out to those 2033 projections, you know, there are some delays, but in this scenario, in this intersection, there's not really a lot of expected changes, whether or not the development is built or not. And then the last one I wanted to look at was Cynthiana Road in Palumbo Place, and that's very similar to the one with Bueno Crossing. You know, the level of services, as you can see, are D's and E's for these vehicles that would be, I think for this one, it's vehicles that would be turning left into the neighborhood rather than the other two dealt with vehicles that would be leaving. But the actual per second delays that would sort of change between build and no build scenarios are not really all that significant. The last thing that I noted from the traffic study was that the traffic study identified that at the Oxford Drive and Cynthiana Road intersection for Cynthiana Road, turn lanes are already warranted whether or not the condos get built. And I just wanted sort of that on the record that, you know, there's already a need for infrastructure improvements to serve the Oxford Drive intersection with Cynthiana Road, but it's not, I guess the need is there already whether or not the neighborhood gets built, I guess is really just the main thing. But I'll be happy to answer any questions you all may have.
Help me understand. So 3 additional connection points have been added?
2.
2?
2. The connections that have been added since are really, I guess this northern one at Palumbo Place, that connection is new since
Okay.
the zone change hearing. And then the other connection that is new is really this here, where Wellesley now connects to the Abbey Old Oxford neighborhood,
Okay.
which ultimately leads out to Old Oxford Road.
Okay. But the question is whether or not the criteria in the approval, the condition of approval, has been met.
Yeah, with the addition of those.
Of the Lexus Way? That was the
well,
expectation of the?
That was, so.
I'm confused, I guess.
No, you're fine.
Thinking I'm missing something.
I can back up. So, yeah, I made the recommendation for the condition. My intention was for the condition to apply to Lexus Way being constructed.
I see.
I will acknowledge that in the wording of it, the word Lexus Way is not in the wording. So it is hard for me to say what the Planning Commission meant when they approved it with that condition. And And so that's what they're asking clarification on. Is
Got it.
did the
Okay, 'cause I was
commission mean
confused. I was like,
Lexus
there's
Way,
two more, but
or
we're
did the
trying to
commission mean
decide
that
if there
these
is.
other,
Okay.
these other connections might suffice?
Now I understand, thank you.
Back up one more slide to where it is being, where it actually is.
Oh, sorry, let me go back a little further then. Yeah.
Yeah, there. So no matter what, it would all have to go through that road. So you
Yes.
can have 16 accesses out here, but they still gotta go through that road.
They would
But they still
still
gotta go
all
through
start on
Schneider.
Schneider Boulevard.
So it makes sense to me that, yes, you would be thinking that there'd be a second access coming out.
But from a traffic impact standpoint, what the study shows is it's irrelevant?
I mean, that, it's
Just
hard to
making
say.
sure, again, I'm
Yeah,
just making sure I
yeah,
understand.
I would say, I mean, at least my look at it is that, I mean, there are impacts.
Yeah. Maybe
and
irrelevance too
there
strong.
are some-
It's negligible.
For
Maybe
some
that's a
of them.
better
I
word.
mean, the Oxford Drive and Cynthiana Road intersection in particular does show changes.
Yeah.
I mean.
Not significant,
Yeah.
I guess would be.
This one is probably the biggest of the impacts that we would expect in a 2023 traffic
Right.
numbers. Obviously, these are all very alarming numbers for 2033, but they're also maybe a little unrealistic. I wouldn't expect that somebody would wait almost, 4 minutes per vehicle to turn out. People would probably find other avenues.
Right, I would guess.
I don't know how well the model might adjust for that or not, but.
And is that, but why are those numbers so much higher in 33 versus 23 if it's built out like now?
Yeah, I can let the applicant's consultant answer that, yeah.
But the bottom line, there still is, there
You
still
were
is
on
an
in
impact. They're
2017?
showing the numbers of
Yes,
D
there will be an
for
impact.
2023 already.
Yeah.
But you're saying, Matt, regardless, it's gonna be built,
I thought he said it was
or it's
2017.
not, unless they have the two ingress egresses, correct?
I didn't come home to April.
If they have two, they
See,
can
maybe it was.
Yeah,
build
they can do the full build out
the full build out.
if,
And if they doesn't have the two, they
then
can't.
they'll basically hold at the build phase 1 level on the chart.
Which is 82, right?
Yes.
And 166 is the full bit?
Yes.
Okay.
And you feel like that you was, Lexus Way was what you meant,
Yes,
but it's not worded in
correct.
the ordinance, and that's why we're here
It's
tonight.
not, yes, it's not specifically named in the condition.
It just says a maximum of 82 dwelling units shall be allowed until a second point of access is made. That's the extent of it.
They're asking,
Yeah.
have they already got those second access? Let me ask you a couple of questions, or
Yeah.
make one statement on that. Realistically, Oxford Drive and Cynthiana Road is too close to Cherry Blossom Way to get another light there, isn't it?
I would imagine so.
And 95% of the traffic coming out of there are turning left. They're not going to Cynthiana, they're turning left to go to the bypass.
I would
Is
think
that a
most of
fair
that.
statement to make? Yeah.
Yes.
And now my question, the main reason for having a second access, is it for traffic control or is it for safety reasons, getting?
In this case, my reasoning was for traffic.
Okay.
Do the minutes from that meeting shed any more light on the intent of the commission?
I don't think that they did. I don't know if you recall them
They
shedding
just
any
say
additional light.
This,
They only say what the
yeah.
condition of approval was.
Yeah.
But you mentioned Lexus Way, right? I mean, in the
Yeah, we discussed Lexus Way because it was, there was an area reserved for future right-of-way on their concept plan. They've got a potential access shown to the south side of the property. So we discussed Lexus Way, definitely.
And that could be a year, 5 years, 10 years, who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like you said, there's still no definitive date.
Correct.
So if this was to move forward, potentially we're going to be stuck with, we don't know for how long.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned that if you have to wait too long, you'll find alternate routes, just like happens here in town now. If Broadway gets backed up, people going out to the bypass, they'll turn right and go up through Indian Hills, cutting through Seminole Trail all the way out there, or coming down Broadway, they'll turn up Clayton Avenue and go up to Military and to try to mitigate the traffic.
If only
And that's-
Broadway were 4 lanes.
Yeah, instead of a bicycle lane.
Yeah.
And they're gonna do the same thing here. It's not ideal to go back through that Ball Home development, because that's going through a residential development that you gotta make 2 or 3 turns, they're gonna slow you down, and then come out on Old Oxford, which is small, at least it has been repaved, and then dumps you out on Connector Road. And so you're forever getting off of that or on it, so.
This traffic study, does it take into account, and maybe this is a better question for Mr. Billings, we have so much stuff in process on Oxford Road too. It seems like, obviously, every other meeting, Oxford Road's a point of contention, right? And developments on it.
Yeah, I mean, that would be a question I would
Okay.
ask the consultant, for sure.
Well, if you haven't been out there, these condos are already under construction. How many buildings have been built? 8 or 10?
The Phase 2 is
10?
already,
Thank you.
Phase 2 is already under construction?
Yeah,
No,
these
not-
condos.
Just Phase 1?
Just Phase 1.
Okay.
Yeah.
What spurred this conversation?
The exits.
I understand that, but because of, and maybe the applicant will address this
Yeah.
too, though.
They will.
Okay.
What made them say, oh, wait, red flag, I guess is my question. But
All right. Owners or Mr. Billings?
Can you leave that actually chart up there, and I'll go to my presentation in just a second?
You were going to limit him to 3 minutes, weren't you, Charlie?
Yes.
Give me, all right. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the Planning Commission, my name is Nathan Billings. I'm an attorney with Billings Law Firm in Lexington, and it's my pleasure this evening to represent 15th Hole, which is the current owner of the condo area we're talking about. With me today, I have Josh Comer from Palmer Engineering, who is our traffic engineering partner on this. Thoroughbred Engineering, they're not here tonight, they don't need to be, but they are the engineers on the project designing sewers, storm, sidewalks, that kind of stuff. So a lot of the technical questions you may have tonight, I may call Mr. Coburn to step up and help answer. While I'm an attorney, and I think I can make some decent legal arguments. He's the data guy, and is going to be able to answer some things like algorithms and how traffic studies technically work, although I can generally tell you that stuff. Well, I've got a formal presentation I want to go to in a second, but because this slide is up here that Matt had prepared, I thought it might be helpful to maybe walk through this instead of having to try to switch out stuff. I have this slide in a different format, but actually like his slide, the data actually presents a little better than my sort of lots of data chart, if that makes sense. So specifically, this is a summary of what the traffic is at Cynthiana Road or US 62 and Oxford, which is probably the primary intersection that we're talking about for Pleasant Valley. And when we started this project, I think I'm going to answer all of the questions you all have asked of staff in the next couple of minutes. When we started this project, and staff said, hey, with your request, we think you should do a traffic impact study, which we were not required to do with the zone change because it didn't necessitate one under the traffic standards. So we didn't do one before because we weren't required to do one. They said we need to do one now. So one of the parts of that evaluation was, where are we going to do the traffic studies? So we did some analysis, we met with staff, and we talked about the 6 intersections on where we should do it. Not just the 5 places of ingress, egress in and out of Pleasant Valley, but also a central location at the corner of Schneider and Wellesley. And the reason we did there is because that's the point at which the traffic from this part of the development, from this part of Pleasant Valley, and everything really south of Wellesley, figures out where it's going to go in the neighborhood. It's not 100% true, but you make the decision, do you go right on Wellesley to go through Abbey Old Oxford, out to Herndon? You go on up Schneider. At what point do you make a decision to take a left at Schneider and Old Oxford and head south? At what point do you make a decision to go straight across to this intersection? At what point do you make a decision to go north along to Bueno Crossing, or then north on to Palumbo? So there's a bunch of these decision trees. And so what we determined in meeting with Joe and Matt, and Ben, I can't remember if you were there or not, I think you were, but is how we're going to allocate the traffic from this to each of those intersections. Does that make sense? So we said, you're not going to put 100% at this intersection, but this intersection is going to bear the brunt of it. Does that make sense? And for example, Bueno Crossing in Palumbo is going to probably take one of the least amounts. So we put 5%, I think it was, at Palumbo. We put 5% at Bueno. I think we put 70% at this intersection. So each of those has some internal assumptions, if you will, that says 70% is going to go through this intersection. Now, no one knows whether that's right or not because we have all this other cars coming through other places in Pleasant Valley, but we felt like at least for the evaluation, that's a valid assumption. Does that make sense? So we don't know, is it 96% or 95% there? No, but it's the highest percentage we have. So the way we do a traffic study is the first thing is you look at, all right, what's the current status? Well, while their phase 1 has been approved for 82 units, and actually while it's approved for 82, the current building configuration, 2 buildings are ready to go online, which will be 10 condo units, probably sometime in mid to late August, to answer your question, Mr. Chairman. So probably there are 8 condominiums in each building. So 2 buildings should be finished in the next 30 or 45 days. I actually approved the condo flats last week, so we're pretty close to that. It's taken about 4 or 5 months to build those since the construction started. So we did an analysis to say right now we don't have any additional residential traffic coming through and from the development because there's none right now. That makes sense. There's some construction traffic, but that may affect this number, but it's a pretty de minimis number. So currently right now, in the AM peak, an AM peak is 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. And the PM peak, I think, is 4 to 6, correct?
We have 2:30 to 6.
2:30 to 6:30, okay, so it's even a broader area. Is to say currently there's a 17-second delay in the AM. And if you look forward to when, let's say tomorrow, we have 80 units, actually 82 units that are built. That means the delay in seconds is going to go from 17 to 18 to 19. So it doesn't materially impact an AM peak, if that makes sense, how you look at this evaluation. What we did is said, let's look at what the current is, let's look at what's approved currently. So right now we're entitled to 82. And then let's think, if we were to allow 166 units, what does that look like? So that's why this chart is important as to one intersection, and we have it for all the intersections. It looked at the 2023 PM peak, so it currently said, all right, what's the current level of service? Well, the breakout of this is at 35 seconds, this goes to an 8. So currently, if you look at this intersection, for no build, in other words, none of our condominiums come online, the current delay in the afternoon of this is a 34-second delay, which is a level D. And these levels are just like a grade. A is good, B is acceptable, C is acceptable, D is not, E is bad, and F is failure. Really, D, E, and Fs from a traffic standards are places you don't want to be. You really want A, B, and C level services, if that makes sense. Sort of like grades. So currently, the level that there is at 34 seconds is not acceptable, regardless of whether we bring a unit on or not. However, that's only 1 second off already being in. So while the level of service, when assuming there's 82 units that comes on, drops 4 seconds to level E, practically it's a to use your word, none of this is not important to me. If you had one house, it has cars. It's going to impact anybody. I don't want to in any way to minimize that. It is not, in my opinion, a material impact at this period for 2023 because the seconds of delay is pretty minimal. It's already not acceptable. So again, assuming that we were to allow the full build out with it today, it's still not making it really any worse. Materially worse, certainly not. Marginally worse, possibly, but it's not changing the world. So so this is what currently is today. So then we have to come to understand, well, what are these 2 columns starting 2033 look at? And so you look at a projected rate of growth for the area, and this is one of the models, or one of the assumptions that is built into the model. And this is where engineers come in because they use 2 databases, and we use an anticipated growth rate of 2.4% per year for Georgetown. When we met with staff, I think you all suggested 2.2 or 2.3. We actually estimated 2.4, which is a little higher than what staff suggested, because we felt like that's what the state transportation numbers use, and we wanted to make sure that we would rather over-project than under-project, just to make sure we're doing our best to come and explain this to you. So this says, okay, 10 years from now, assuming that rate of growth in this area, what's going to happen to this goes from in the morning to 17-second to a 27-second delay. Now, this assumes that Lexus Way is not built. This assumes that Snyder Boulevard is not carried through the Ball development over to Old Oxford. So it has an assumption built in, if that makes sense. I don't know what will happen in the future. You don't know what. So what we're required to do is look at as if everything else is exactly the same for roadways, exits, entrances, except for the traffic count. Does that make sense? So it's basically to get a true apples to apples comparison. So you'll see the level of service in 2033 basically goes from a level C to a level D, and on a partial build or a full build, it still stays the same. Like it's not changing materially what's going to happen regardless. When you come to here, and this is what Josh will have to explain in a second, once you hit on the 2023 PM peak is for 34 seconds, the modeling says it goes to 151 seconds. So that's 2.5 minutes. Somebody would be waiting that per car. I don't have a crystal ball, but I don't think that you're going to have a line of 10 cars each waiting 2.5 minutes. That's a 25-minute wait. So what's going to happen is something else is going to go. And this is what I understand generically. Mr. Coburn's happy to talk about it more specifically. What happens is once this gets to a level of F here, the second count is this algorithm that doesn't even work anymore. It just gets to an F and it just gets bad. So is that really 151 seconds? The answer is no. And that's because the algorithm doesn't even really project what's going to happen. Could it be off? Could it be 75 seconds? Possibly. It just doesn't accommodate what the actual number is other than to say this. It's an F. It's bad. It's not great now in the morning. It's certainly not great now in the afternoon, but it's definitely going to be an F in 10 years unless something changes. So this is one of those red flags that, like, this is why I think, Matt's presentation at the very end says there are already changes warranted at this intersection because of that number. And so then you use our data and it sort of extrapolates out that data and creates these other numbers. All I can tell you is these numbers are not reliable from the number of seconds at this level, other than to say it's not good for anybody. It's not good for us. It's not good for people who live in Pleasant Valley. It's not good for people who are on Cynthiana Pike. But that's why you have a model that looks at it. But I can't tell you that it actually goes from 151 seconds to 210 because the algorithm itself breaks down once you hit a level of that. If that'll hit a pause and say, I don't know if I've done it correctly, Mr. Coburn, but if you want to address like how the algorithm works, just to address the second count, because I want to make sure that's to me this big red flag. Hey, this is a problem. Let's talk about it. And I want to make sure that the commissioners have the opportunity to ask questions about why it's certainly an F, but why the model doesn't work.
So, why don't you go to the podium?
Well,
Please.
I'd like to ask, excuse me, I'd like to ask a clarification question.
Yes, sir.
to you. So, do you mind saying again, what were the people that live where it's not going to be good for them? What people, what did you say?
People who live in Pleasant Valley.
Pleasant Valley, and then you
Yeah.
said Cynthiana Road in general?
That's correct. And the reason I said that is on Cynthiana Road, where Oxford comes in, it's not a through road, right? So if you're coming out of Oxford, you either take a right and going to Cynthiana, or you're taking a left and going down to the bypass, right? It's a cherry blossom. So one of the modeling that Palmer, or not even modeling, but one of the conclusions Palmer Engineering came to is if you're coming eastbound from Cherry Blossom on US 62, and you want to take a right-hand turn into Oxford in order to then come into Pleasant Valley, there is no right-hand deceleration lane there. There's a very small shoulder, and there's not even the right-of-way, I can't say the right-of-way width isn't there, the right-of-way infrastructure is not there to create one very easily. What that does is people who are on 62 who want to go east, everybody who wants to take a right, everyone below them has to slow down because that person has to slow down for them to take a right. Does that make sense? That's why I said it's not good for people on Cynthiana Road. The reason it also causes a problem are people who are in Oxford who want to take a right and go to the east, or people who are in Oxford who want to take a left and come toward Cherry Blossom, and somebody's in this lane, they don't always know if they're going to take a right, slow down, or they're going to go straight through. So what are they going to do? They're going, hopefully, be cautious until they know that car's actually turning and they can see behind it. So there's the delay factors there are because you don't have deceleration lanes and improvements, which we have no control over. It's just the design of that intersection is lacking, in my opinion, required improvements. Not regardless of what we do, just because it's good for the people of Georgetown, it's good for the people of Pleasant Valley. That's a lot more detail than maybe you asked for, but,
Yeah. Just want to make sure I had clarification of the two roads.
okay.
You said the peak time window was 4 to 6
AM or PM?
PM?
PM is 2:30 to 6:30. That's
Okay.
what it was said.
That was my question.
I'm actually going to clarify that a little bit. So
Okay.
we counted that longer duration. The analysis looked at the worst hour within that duration of time.
Okay.
So we counted to make sure we accounted for Toyota's shift change.
Mhm.
I believe, if memory serves, the peak hour ended up being 4 to 5. So this is specifically looking at
On an average
that
day, I'd say
time.
that's true.
Now, let me ask you a question about, so the AM, is that coming out of Pleasant Valley and getting onto Cynthiana Road?
All of these numbers here are exiting Pleasant Valley onto
Okay.
Cynthia.
So realistically, the PM numbers, you're not going to have the traffic that you do in the morning, will you?
Right. And so really what it is it's delay per vehicle. And the reason it's so bad is less the volume exiting Pleasant Valley. It's the large increase as that 2.4% continues to grow along Cynthiana. Those individuals trying to exit have fewer gaps in traffic to actually get out.
Okay.
Because unlike a signal, they don't have a dedicated green phase to allow them to exit safely. They're having to wait until there's a gap, and as traffic grows, fewer gaps occur.
If the staff or the commission need to correct me, I will gladly say I'm wrong, but what we're looking at tonight is trying to decide whether that second exit has been met or not. So I could care less what's going to happen in 2033, to be honest with you.
You're worried about 2023.
I'm worried about this year and next year.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, 2023 is
You mean
irrelevant.
2033?
2033 is irrelevant, as far as I'm concerned, because we need to be looking at, did we
What was the
say
intent?
what we said back in 2017?
What was the intent?
You know, that's what we're looking at there.
So, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for that comment, because I think if there are two requests we have for tonight, and that's what, if you want to put my presentation up now, because what our request is to either clarify what the Planning Commission said in the conditions of approval in 2017, and which was affirmed in the 2018 development plan approval, or if what staff's position is, and what I think is not an unreasonable interpretation of what the Planning Commission meant was not necessarily exactly what it says, but then to ask to modify that, which is one of the reasons why we had the notification process here, as if this is a new development plan.
Right.
And so, and I also think that if we're going to look at this as who cares about the 10, well, I shouldn't say that way. It's not that 10 years from now doesn't matter. I think the point is, if you look at what exists today from a no-build scenario to a build phase 1 scenario to a build 166 units, you're going to see that there is no material difference. And so even if the commission meant that it needed a second direct access to Lexus Way in 2017, and the commission affirms that intent tonight, the question then is, with that understanding, because of the traffic impact study that we've done now, which is actually probably more relevant than one we would have done in 2017 at the zone change, what you're going to see is it doesn't materially affect anybody exiting Pleasant Valley from a delay situation. The
But it
levels
would
of service-
underscore the need for the Lexus Way in order for the build-out to happen.
No,
Would agree
what
with
I'm
that.
saying is if you look at the levels of delay in service between today for 2023
Right.
for AM and PM with what we have with no units built, in other words, no build,
Understood.
with the phase 1 or with the full build out, nobody is material impacted because the delays are so insignificant, the levels of service don't change across the board.
I guess what I'm saying is it supports the expectation, at least, that, or the intent initially, that Lexus Way be built in terms of that grade F, right? While there's no material difference between the two, it certainly underscores. Exactly, exactly, for the development period, right?
For that, not only that development.
But everything happening on that road, yeah.
The Barlow
Everything.
development all the way
Yeah,
up.
The
exactly.
Ball homes at Abbey and
Ball
Oxford,
homes.
yes, absolutely.
Barlow, Dillon.
So, just for the record, we have submitted a traffic impact study. Not that paper matters, but this is not a small document with lots of data that I'd submit into the record. We have an affidavit of notice into the record that we're required to do when we give notice. And then I will pass out here in a few minutes a proposed revised condition of approval from the 2018 development plan, which is what we're technically seeking to either clarify or amend tonight.
What was were there any, I'm assuming there wasn't anything in the minutes then that clarified either the 2018 meeting, which Charlie maybe was a part of.
Not that I recall.
Yeah.
I looked at them when I drafted the staff report.
Okay.
I didn't recall anything specific from the commission comments about that condition.
So this is what we've asked for, we've talked about already, the clarification or modification. By background, Mr. Summers went through that, I think, pretty exhaustively, so I'm going to skip through a couple of these slides, but in 2017, the zone change was submitted. The staff report at that time recommended, as you see, the red light doesn't work on the screen here, but a connection is made to an extension of Lexus Way. That's what the staff report said. Our proposal, we agreed with all of staff's findings and conclusions except for this one, and we asked them to approve 99 dwelling units until the creation of a second access point. The Planning Commission approved, and you've already acknowledged, I think, the main reason why we're here tonight is that it doesn't actually reference what staff said Lexus Way. It uses this, it did adopt staff's 82 dwelling units, but it talks about a second point of access is made in the conditions of approval. And so they agreed with staff as to one item, but I think we agreed with us as to another item. And so what I want to make sure that I point out is this wasn't something where we came back the next month. We didn't come back in 2018 on the development plan and ask for a change to that. We didn't come back with a amended final development plan, the final development plan in 2020 and ask for a change. We came back for amended final development plan in April of 2022 to change a building and clubhouse location, doesn't affect density or anything, but didn't address it then. We waited until January of this year, and now we're here tonight, not quite 6 years, but I'll call it 5.5 years after that zone change approval condition was made. So we didn't rush to judgment to try to seek something. What we tried to do is play out through the process to understand, is Lexus Way going to happen? We know that. That's probably the primary driver in the discussion. And I think at the time, staff believed, we believed from our own research, that Lexus Way, while it wasn't promised to us, it wasn't promised to anybody, we believed at the time that it was probably 2 to 3 years out, probably to start with a probably 5-year build out. I think it was a fair, not promised from anybody, but hope is probably more than a hope. Staff report reflected that as well. And so I don't think anyone drilled down significantly into the different options of what that second access point meant, other than the commission itself didn't adopt the language Lexus Way. And since then, we now have 2 additional access points that have come online since then. And our traffic impact study wasn't required at that time because the trip generations from the condominiums versus single family didn't necessitate it under the zoning ordinance. So we didn't do one at the time. I just sort of went through some of these slides. Only note I would make is that there's a note on the development plan that talks about until a second entrance is usable. It doesn't actually fit exactly with the conditions of approval. I wasn't involved in that development plan, so I don't know why the language doesn't match exactly. It probably should, but I wanted to make sure I pointed that out, just because it's factually correct. I think I have a typo in here that talks about there's 4 separate intersections. There's actually 5 that we know of. So we have Schneider at Old Oxford to go south. We have, Schneider at Oxford to go south. We have Oxford at 62, Bueno at 62, Palumbo at 62, and then Herndon at Old Oxford. And so we have a number of ways for traffic to leave here. But we acknowledge the vast majority of it goes through that US 62 Oxford Drive exit. This is my sort of map that shows the 5 different access points up here. And at this point, we don't have the confidence that Lexus Way extension is a realistic goal is a realistic infrastructure project in the short term. Here we are 5.5 years later from a zone change, and we're just now getting ready to take the first 2 condominium buildings online. I hope they go a lot faster than that. They should go a lot faster than that. But things happen. You hit more rock than you expect, construction costs go up, et cetera. If we begin building today, or not, if we continue building today, and this were to be approved, our request, we would not have 160 units come online tomorrow. We wouldn't have 166 units come online in December. You're talking about a 2 or 3 year build out is likely, just because of construction costs. You have construction timing, you have financing issues, you have occupancy rates to deal with. So all of the study we're looking at from Mr. Mifflin of what's going to happen today is still not 166 units are going to happen today. You're still looking at 3 or 4 years down the road. So here's just a couple of slides to show the intersections we're talking about. There's Oxford and Schneider looking south. This is the main intersection we're talking about, 62 in Oxford. There's 62 in Palumbo looking east. And here is an internal circulator intersection we identified. The reason we've included Schneider at Wellesley is it is not a point of access out of or into the subdivision, but it is really a place along Schneider. So all of our traffic admittedly has to go through Schneider, right? Like, we're at the end of Schneider right now, so let's talk about the 800-pound gorilla. All of it's got to go up Schneider. And we said, well, if it makes stuff worse on Schneider, but we can figure out what happens on the exit points, we really haven't addressed the problem. We really need to understand what's going on Schneider, and we need to understand what's going on the outside. So we looked at the traffic circle as well as part of our study because we wanted to make sure what's going to happen there. This level of service is a A, right? And it's an A and B, and it stays there. And the reason is because the number of actual houses south of Wellesley, south of this circle, is actually pretty insignificant from a trip generation manual standard. And Josh helped educate me on this. Traffic circles, that's here in the middle, while they're bad for your car if you drive over them, tend to be really, really good ways to keep traffic flowing and reduce delays and actually decrease speed. And so they keep traffic moving, so you have lower levels of delay. They decrease speed because you can't go straight through stuff. They reduce the chances of running stop signs. So we wanted to look at that. This is a location of all of the traffic studies we did. You have Herndon over here. You have the Wellesley intersection here. You have Oxford and Schneider here. You have 62 in Oxford here. You have Buena Vista in 62. And you have Palumbo in 62. And what we determined is that number I talked about earlier, that 70% of the traffic is going to come out of this intersection. I think it's 5, it's either 10 or 15 of the balance comes south here. So does anyone know this actually correct? No, but I feel pretty confident that we're hitting pretty close to the mark that shows today, back to your point, Mr. Chairman, that today's traffic at the main intersection is not going to be made worse by the 82 units that have already been approved. And it's not going to be made worse should you all approve 166 units, the total. Is it marginally worse? Absolutely. You had one house that becomes marginally worse, but it doesn't affect the level of services with significant delays that the 10-year period sees. So each of these slides shows the sort of traffic count numbers that go through. This is the same chart that Matt had a minute ago that we talked about. That's why I like his better see the colors. Here's another intersection, which is the 62 Bueno Crossing exit, which is north. We staff had said this is a D or an E. We actually think it's a D. I think there was a slide. You corrected that, I think, in your slide. Yeah. And so this is Palumbo 62. And so what we believe is that the data clearly shows that if you were to allow, assuming you all were to say, hey, we meant a second entrance at Lexus Way 5.5 years ago, assuming that the data shows that if you were to allow a full build out today, that the traffic impact study says people in Pleasant Valley don't experience any worse traffic with a full build out than what they experience with no build out. And the reason is because there is existing traffic problems, but we're not making the traffic problems worse. Those problems pre-exist what we're doing because they already exist before we have a single unit come online. And they're going to continue to exist. And the solution to this is for people like you all people like staff, people like us, to lobby people at the state to say, fix that intersection, because it's not just needed for ours to develop, it's needed for the benefit of Pleasant Valley and everybody in Georgetown who goes out US 62, which is thousands of cars a day. So there's now at least 5 ways in and out of Pleasant Valley. Lexus right-of-way has been preserved. We promised that in the zone change. Every single development plan we have filed has reserved it. The final development plan hasn't reserved. It has not been deeded to the city. We still own it, but it has always been preserved. So it is there, ready to deed to the city, ready to deed to the state whenever they're ready to take it over. That has not changed at all. We don't know the current expansion plans for Lexus Way. We originally thought it was 2 to 3 years out. Clearly, that's not realistic anymore. We think the traffic counts in Pleasant Valley are not made worse by either phase 1 or a phase 2 or a full build. And the 10-year projections are just that. The worst one is the numbers we talked about, the PM peak, which, while it's a level F, it's a level F whether we build or not, absent something else changes. So that we would either ask you all to either clarify the language from 5.5 years ago, or alternatively to modify it to permit that condition to be changed to allow that condition is deemed removed due to at least 4 access points being available in Pleasant Valley. With that, if I may approach Mr. Chairman, I have a draft conditions of approval or proposed revised conditions of approval for you all to see. I've highlighted the change in bold and underlined so you can make a quick reference and ease to it. I've already sent it to Charlie. Joe, here you go. I emailed that to you also, but I think you all had that. May I approach, sir?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
This isn't a court, just show up and hand me this stuff.
I'll do that, and then we'll pass it down the road. Any of those slides, sir. So with that, I'm happy to answer. I know you'll ask a bunch of questions earlier. I think I've answered the questions you all asked of staff. If I didn't, I apologize, but I hope I've gotten to them all.
Well, I'm going to go back, sir, to your opening statement. You know, you've said a couple of times here, this development has no really impact on the big numbers, but I keep going back to where you do show in 23 these changes and these delays by numbers D, E, in several places.
So which specific place are you talking about the delays?
Well, table 1, table 2, so, I mean, there is impact.
Yeah, so this is, so if you're talking about just a current build, this is the delay, this is the difference. And so I acknowledge there's a difference there. And I'm just submitting to you that the 34 seconds is a 35 is an E. And so there's a difference here, but it is not a material difference. This isn't a 20, it's going to a 43.
Yeah, but sir, there is a difference. That's
Sir, if you had one house, it's a difference, absolutely. In fact, and this is where, with the units we'll add, when August comes and we put the first condominium building to plat and people move in, it'll be worse then, because you'll have one more unit connected to that roadway. Is it worse from a material standpoint? No. But I acknowledge anytime you add a single residence, or shoot, somebody gets a 16-year-old, it gets worse.
I guess my comment is it was in the staff report. I feel like that's where it lays. My personal opinion. Mr. Billings, you did not miss your calling. You're good at what you do, but
You mean the Lexus Way was in the staff report?
yes. And I feel like that's where it needs to, I think, my personal opinion, we need to hold what was the way it is now.
That's the way I see it as well.
So that they can't build out, they need that second.
They need Lexus Way, regardless how long it takes to build. To me, that was in the staff report. And of course, I've seen it happen here. I've done it myself. We've all done it, not put the right wording in. Charlie's got on all of us over that, and I think that's what's happened here. My personal opinion.
Yeah.
Were you absent that meeting or something, Charlie?
So he was fishing.
You know, I agree with David. If you look at this lot right here, it's got one exit, and that's on the Snyder Boulevard. Now, granted, Snyder has got multiple exits from that, But from this development, there's only one exit. Now, what Mr. Billings is asking us to do is, we can agree with that, there's only one exit. And if that's what we're saying, then he's asking us to modify to accept those other streets.
Once they get there.
To be used, to get in and out.
No, the
Yeah.
existing
Right.
entrances, yes.
Yeah.
That's
To
not
say,
what
okay,
was
that's what the
stated.
intent was, but this is,
Yeah.
now we'll approve something different, is
Right.
essentially what you're asking.
And I think that's what we
And
asked.
so what's going to happen if we say no tonight and you've got these apartment buildings back there? That's just shutting them down completely.
No,
Well, they'll grow to
it
82.
changes the number.
No, they
It'll
can still
change
go
the
up to
number.
82.
Yeah,
We'll
they
get to
still
82.
build out, just not the 166.
No, one
And you have how many now? 20,
So
you
we-
said, something like
No,
that?
no, we have 2 buildings that will come on, which have a total of 8 in each, so there'll be 16 and hopefully middle of August or so.
Okay.
But we would only build a total of 80, just because the numbers in the buildings
Yeah.
work. But 82 is what's approved, but we
What's your
build.
projected date to get to 80?
We don't have that date. I mean, it depends upon construction cost, financing.
So you can stay
it's-
with 82 with just this one exit on the
Yeah.
Snyder. And you
Until
can't go past it.
That's correct. Now,
Till
what,
Lexus Way gets put in.
162 with Lexus.
Or they come up with another entrance.
what I would like for maybe additional clarification is that Snyder is also proposed to continue on through what is now a Ball Homes development through the southern part of Abbey at Old Oxford over to Old Oxford. And so that would effectively provide for a 2 means, a left-hand turn north on Snyder and a right-hand turn Snyder, or other potential other ways out. Which I don't know at this point, because 5.5 years ago, I didn't anticipate there would be 5 entrances for Pleasant Valley rather than 3. And so Mr. Rest, I don't think you're unfair in what you're saying, what was possibly intended, although the language didn't reflect that. And
Right.
that's what I get paid to do, so I appreciate that. But I acknowledge the debate there, and I acknowledge, I think, the reality. I think I did that in my opening. But I also want to make sure that, one of the things that we are mindful of is that we are beholden to Lexus Way to do this. And the reason I say that is because there are developments all over Scott County where people build units that don't add additional roadways or add additional density. And so while we know what the requirement is it's to 82 units, and while we're discussing whether Lexus Way or second connection and what that might mean, is we would certainly ask you all to at least be open to finding out, are there other ways to solve the traffic outflow problem other than Lexus Way that could accommodate our hopeful growth?
I don't think that's our responsibility.
I'm asking you to
It's
clarify that.
it's somebody's
Need
responsibility.
Another road. The other build outs may not need a Lexus Way,
And,
but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Sorry, Charlie.
And no, that's all right. And to further explain Lexus Way, Cherry Blossom Development wanted to expand their development out there and build additional homes. And that was their same fight, was when Lexus Way opens up, we'll have our second exit. And we said, no, your original plan said you would build a second exit out on Old Oxford Road. And so that's what they're doing now. We don't know when Lexus Way is going to be here.
And it's taken 5 years to get to this point, right? So
Yeah,
it's not
and-
out of the realm of possibility
Yeah, and
that we would know more about the Lexus Way timing. It's not promised, but it's not out of the realm of
Well,
possibility.
the reason I made that second request is not to have you make a ruling tonight that there's some other way we could do it, because I think we have to wait till that comes up. It's to ask for the Planning Commission's openness to not say it has to be Lexus Way no matter what, but to say there may be other ways for us to solve this problem other than Lexus Way.
Yeah.
But the
I don't think we've ever told
Commission has
somebody
done
no
made that
to-
statement in 2017 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
To me, the commission made that then.
But I don't think we've ever said no. If there's another way that solves the same problem, that we wouldn't be open to hearing. It doesn't mean we'll approve it, but it doesn't,
Right. Yeah.
right?
You're not, The commission is authorized to change its prior decisions.
Sure they are.
Doesn't mean you have to.
For the benefit of the community.
If it complies with the comprehensive plan for a zone change, or it complies with subdivision regulations for development plans. It's not always, it's got to be technically correct, not subjectively always correct.
And
So do you all have another proposal to share regarding how to solve the problem?
No, that's what, for now, I'm just asking that if there's if what I hear the commission saying is they're going to deny our application to clarify or to modify from the discussion. And all I'm asking is not to vote on another proposal, but just to be mindful in whatever motion you make, that if it is an adamant, it has to be Lexus Way only, that there's a potential longer-term consequence of that versus additional consideration that perhaps another second access way is still a way to resolve this problem. It's just not the access points that are higher up that I've pointed out.
Sure.
We could put it there that it doesn't, if they can come up with a way that doesn't go through an existing subdivision, that goes
Or Old
through-
Oxford.
Or goes, yeah, or can go to Old Oxford until they.
Maybe an airlift or something?
Doesn't go to Old Oxford until they widen it.
And it could even be just a motion that denies the application and without any finding as to other thing at all, because then the existing language is there. It's just to ask you all in consideration of a motion that you don't say it has to be Lexus Way.
I think we should clarify in the motion what we believe the original intent was, so that 3 years from now, some other commission isn't having this same conversation.
If I might just throw something out, it really bothers me getting into original intent. I absolutely believe that's what Matt's intent was. That's not what you adopted. I certainly understand you saying that what has happened in the last 5 years is not sufficient to create an actual second exit. So no to any other, actual relief in that sense. But to say that, oh, no, it's got to be Lexus, that's not what you said. And unless we've got some pretty technical, good, solid reasons to say nothing's going to fit except Lexus, and I don't think we've got that.
And I don't think we're saying that in any way.
But some of the discussion was like that. If that's what was intended, we should have said that. We didn't say it, but we can still say what has happened is not sufficient to satisfy the additional exit entrance requirements. Because everything's got to go through one spot to get to the other 4 or 5. That's not sufficient. That does say to him, our mind's open as to what might be. It doesn't say to him that anything's going to solve it other than Lexus, perhaps, because it looks like Lexus may be the only thing that actually saves that area, in any significant way. But to say that it's Lexus, that's not what we ruled, and I don't think we can now come back later after they've made all of their investments and whatnot and say, oh, by the way, that is in fact what we meant. It wasn't. That's not what we said.
This first sentence, a condition of approval was placed on the site restricting it to a maximum of 82 dwelling units until a second access was constructed to serve that site. And it doesn't say Lexus Way. You get on down there and it starts talking about Lexus Way, but that condition was to get a second site. Yeah, and it can be someplace else.
That's right, and under the circumstances, you don't believe apparently that that has happened, so you say no to that.
Yeah.
But we cannot then retrofit Lexus Way into it
Say
as
that
the
it has
only
to
way,
be.
because that's not what you all
Right.
did in 18, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay.
But the investment part should not play into it, because if what was original approval was for 82 units, that would be the investment part.
Well, but we gave them, in effect, conditioned upon them going further. I guarantee you, they made investments in reliance on what we did, and if we have an action that people can't rely on, we don't have much. They have got to be able to rely on what we do.
The way I would look at it respectfully is when a condition approval is made, you can expand that, but you can't take it back away. And so to limit that language now to say it has to be Lexus Way when it didn't say that in the condition of approval, it would be a taking from us that would therefore not be constitutional. And so that's why I brought that up in the vernacular way to say, please don't make a finding tonight that has to be Lexus Way, because I don't think that's what was said. Well, it may have been intended. I know that's what staff asked for, and we've never disputed with staff over that. The planning commission, for whatever reason, just used different language. And so you all are not agreeing with my interpretation of that language tonight, which I totally respect. I just ask you not to rule tonight that your language only meant Lexus Way tonight, because that I don't think would be appropriate.
But we could if we chose to.
I think you would be engaged in a taking if you did that.
Yeah, we really don't have the
I just
authority
feel like
to
it
do
needs
that.
to stand like it's written.
That's exactly what I'm
If
asking.
Lexus Way's not on there, if it's a second, it's gotta be the second entrance or exit or egress. You know, that's where it is now, is where I think it needs to stand.
The language, you mean?
The language, yes.
But it does, but we would agree that the current access points do not meet,
Yeah, don't satisfy that.
exactly, don't satisfy the
Exactly.
requirement.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
How do we structure it that, because we're talking about 3 to 5 years in the future as far as, this phase of development is finished, which I understand that you would probably want to somewhat overlap and begin your infrastructure of the next phase as you're concluding this phase, asking you to confirm that, you're not the developer, I get that. But so how do we structure this to where it comes back for review before, that there is a possibility that they can continue to phase out once the 82 that they're entitled to are finished? How do we structure it to that way it's fair on every side and make sure that, because we don't know what's going to be in 3 or 4 years. Lexus Way may be done, probably not. There may be some other solution by then, maybe. So how do we structure it to then where you have the opportunity, and then we also have the, is that making any sense whatsoever? I just, to leave the door open without saying Lexus Way, but to where they have to.
You leave the language the way it is.
Yeah,
They've got to
just like how
have
it is.
effectively another access point. And you're saying tonight
Which
that
really then
what they've
doesn't
got
require
now
any
isn't.
action on our part?
I think Mr. Shirley
Already
answered
in
the
the
question
record.
is, nothing has stopped us filing plans for infrastructure and utilities that could serve those additional 86 units. We just can't get a building permit for those 86 units. So we can still install sanitary sewer, storm sewer, electric boxes, water lines sufficient to handle it. So I don't want to mislead anybody to say we can't build those because of this and it's going to cause us a problem. I mean, there's other issues involved, but that's why we make a general request. But I don't think I'm asking the commission to try to address a very well-founded concern with the hearing tonight. It's often called the law of unintended consequences, that I would love some protection for that stuff, but I don't want to over-ask either and cause another problem that I'm not prepared to address.
And Georgetown needs to, people are looking for places to live all the time, so we've got to get some infrastructure in place. My gosh, tell your people to put more pressure on guys in Frankfurt.
So is there any action we need to take, Charlie, for letting the current language stand
Well,
as it is?
we have a request before us, and so I think the motion would be to deny, well, first off, I think we need to say in the motion that we are not requiring literally Lexus Way. But we're also denying the request that in the alternative,
People must speak before we say.
that in the alternative, well, and they'll get their chance, I just want to finish the thought. And in the alternative, we're also denying the amendment or the modification to the condition that is being requested, because this does not match what the condition was and doesn't satisfy it. So they're still free to go out and try as best they can to come back with a third option someday.
I'm James Prestis at 205 Stephen Drive. I would like to ask that if you all deny this, it's going to come back again someday. If there's no other access point, or ball homes might connect, but everybody goes right into Oxford and not, but everybody's going to still funnel down Schneider. When was that traffic count done?
It was this year, back in spring, when school was in session.
Was school session?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good, because that's the one critical thing I wanted to make sure.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. Yeah, but just make sure, that if this comes up again, that it can't be just going to the right, going to Old Oxford. Everybody's going to Toyota. So they might get their second entrance, but it's going to be the wrong second entrance. It's not going to help disperse the traffic flow.
Well, I do think that's what we were talking about, is it needs to be another access to their property.
Right.
Not that it still goes to the same access they have now going out.
That's what I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, that's, I think that's my right.
Yeah,
what we're talking about.
yep.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a recommendation, and I'll accept a motion to deny approval of this request, but in that, not specify that Lexus Way be that second entrance.
Yeah, you could do it as simply as a motion that says the additional access points argued do not satisfy the condition put down on the original approval, because it does not actually give you an effective second
Okay.
access point. We probably, maybe it's even better not to even mention Lexus Way, because it's not in
muddy
the
it.
thing. And we're in effect, at that point, would be opining on something that's just an argument. Well, it isn't even there, so probably just leave that alone and say, no, the additional streets that we've talked about, intersections, do not satisfy the condition of a second access point, and therefore, request denied.
I'll make the motion that the additional access points do not meet the requirements.
And I'll second that.
All right, I have a motion by Ms. Singer. And a second by Mr. Jesse. Then I'll write it up. Ms. Singer?
Yes.
Mr. Shirley?
Yes.
Mr. Jesse?
Yes.
Mr. Vest?
Yes.
Mr. Stone?
No.
Mr. Garrett?
Yes.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes there. Okay. Thank all of you for your time. Have any other business that needs to come before the commission this evening? Joe?
When's your official start date at your new job?
August 7th.
August 7th. You can take some time off before? Of course, that's a pretty big move to Oklahoma.
Really just time to move.
Is it near where your family is?
Yeah.
Because Oklahoma's a pretty big state. Okay, great. So where you grew up, is it the community you grew up in?
I live in Tulsa.
Okay.
This will be Oklahoma City.
Okay, wonderful.
2 hours.
Great. I'm happy for you.
Yeah, but still Oklahoma.
Thank you.
Thank you for your input, James. Appreciate it. All right. I will.
Okay. Are you going to send something out about it? Yeah. Okay.
I call this commission meeting closed.
Amen.
Oh, good, okay.